Miyamura is an NPC who somehow befriends the school's most popular girls despite his low-life look, but it all changes when he shows her his 6 inches of plot and tells she can gag on it, that she starts being an obedient housewife in hopes of getting clapped by him. It all starts when Professor Yasuda tells his students to make the most of their summer vacation because they'll be studying for college exams next year. He encourages them to go to the beach and says he'll come along too. I wonder why this guy would be at the beach where all his students will be in their swimwear, but a student named Toru boldly says no one wants to go to the beach with their teacher. Now that's a class president we all want. After class, Yuki admits Yasuda is pretty hot if he quits serving everyone some yappuccinos, and Hori says at least he's a good teacher. She then reveals she ran into him in the hallway and he told her not to worry about being mid because she's just a girl at the end of the day. Yuki then tells Hori that a guy from another school wanted her contact info, but Hori says no, because if he didn't have the balls to ask on his own, he should try again after watching some Wizard Liz videos. Toru then suggests they hit up a karaoke place, but Hori tells them to go without her because that's what pygmies do for attention. Just then, a guy named Miyamura passes by and hands her the phone she just dropped. After he leaves, the group comments that he's always so reserved and assumes he must be the dork who sits in his room and has imaginary arguments all day. They ask Toru if he knows anything about Miyamura, but he is as clueless as the next guy because why would he have info on a nobody guy when he can get the deets on all the hottest chicks in school? Just then, Hori lifts at her phone and sprints home, making them wonder if she got a pickup call for her secret boyfriend. When she gets home, she turns on the vacuum and starts cleaning like me on a Sunday. Following that, she picks up her brother Suda from school, and as she walks home, she sees girls of her age living hot girl summers while she lives the trade wife life. Later, as she takes care of the laundry, Suda arrives with blood coming out of his nose, much to her shock. As she tends to him, the guy who brought him home decides to take his leave, but Suda grabs onto his shirt because these siblings love attention all the time. Hori then asks him to stay for a while so she can properly thank him for taking care of her brother Bonnie Blue style. Later, he explains that Suda fell because a dog barked at him. What a loser if you ask me. But according to the savior guy, he's a smart kid because he quickly told him his name and address. Doesn't sound so smart to me because that's the one things kids aren't supposed to tell strangers. He then calls Hori by her name and says he's impressed at her householding skills, which shocks her. She asks him how he knows her name, and the guy says they're in the same class and that his name is Miyamura, shocking her even more. The next day, Hori is still in disbelief and keeps glaring at Miyamura because he looks way different in school. Wow, Hori, stalker much? Unable to resist, she walks up to the guy and asks him to come over to her place again because Suda has grown a liking to him. Who the heck uses their sibling to score? He promises to pick a picture book on the way, but Hori says he doesn't have to. Miyamura is shocked that Hori is still talking to him because he was certain she'll avoid him after yesterday. Hori admits she was blown away at first, but then she realized she's pretty much the same, so it didn't matter. When Miyamura thanks her with a smile, she pulls a Brad Mondo and tells him to get rid of that haircut and those glasses so he can finally get a girl to look at him without internally cringing. However, Miyamura says he has a lot of piercings and he uses his hair to hide them. Later at Hori's place, she learns that Miyamura is not that much of an otaku. His family runs a cake shop and he used a safety pin to give himself piercings some years ago. On top of that, he barely gets a passing grade while Hori herself scores straight A's. Talk about a star-crossed romance. As they look into a grocery magazine because apparently they've never heard of Netflix, Hori pulls a Joe Goldberg and realizes that Miyamura has pretty eyes and his eyelashes are very long. She then diverts the topic to hide her thirsty behavior, saying there is a discount on eggs and she'll get there before 4 p.m. to avail the offer. However, she's called to the AV room after the last class, so she forces Miyamura to do her bidding. The guy then runs to the store by jumping the school fence over Yuki and manages to grab the eggs in time. If only he could grab fate by its eggs and make on Hori already. At night, he acts like an upstanding citizen and tells Hori that he ran into Yuki on the way, but she didn't recognize him because he wasn't wearing his glasses. Hori mindlessly says she doesn't want anyone else to see that side of him, but then becomes conscious and leaves to get some drinks. Typical girl behavior. To make her feel better, Miyamura says he also doesn't want others to see her in her housewife mode in case they call Child Protective Services. Hori gets nervous and shoves the glass in his face, frantically telling him to think before speaking. While blushing, she wonders how Miyamura can say such things with a straight face and starts calling him a dummy repeatedly, as if his compliments don't make her all moist like a sheet mask. Miyamura then explains that while he still likes seeing her in school, he prefers seeing her in an apron because it gives him the "I just died in your arms tonight" feeling. Days later, Miyamura arrives feeling uneasy, revealing that their upcoming PE class will involve swimming. At first, Hori does not understand why he is so stressed, but then Miyamura lifts his shirt, revealing that his body is covered in tattoos like an ex-con. Although they soon find out that swimming is optional, Miyamura remains anxious, and his worries only grow further as he is a crazy overthinker like all of us after watching a Black Mirror episode. While they chat on the class balcony because they come to school to literally do anything besides studying, Toru and Yuki observe from a distance because they have nothing better to do with their lives and wonder when and how these two became friends. After Hori leaves, Toru starts a conversation with Miyamura, casually asking if he and Hori are dating. Miyamura quickly denies it, saying they are just friends and wouldn't even make a good couple. Toru is still curious and asks more questions, prompting Miyamura to tease him by asking if he has a crush on Hori. To his surprise, Toru openly admits that he does like her and marks his territory like a true alpha, making Miyamura realize why Toru always seems so fixated on her during class. As they process this super enlightening information, another student reminds them that PE is about to start. In the changing room, Miyamura puts on his winter uniform instead of gym clothes, which confuses Toru. Sensing his suspicion, Miyamura finally decides to show Toru his tattoos in their first fruity moment and makes him promise to keep it a secret. Toru is initially shocked but soon understands why Miyamura always wears long sleeves even in the heat. Out of curiosity, Toru moves Miyamura's bangs aside and is even more surprised to see multiple hidden piercings. Turns out the guy they thought to be a simp for goths is the most emo guy himself. Later, he asks why Miyamura doesn't embrace this side of himself and preaches him to live his truth like any influencer during Pride Month, making Miyamura admit that he got the tattoos and piercings on a whim. Been there, done that? Their conversation shifts to Hori, and Toru asks how Miyamura became close to her because apparently he has no game of his own. Miyamura explains that it all started when he walked her younger brother Suta home one day, which led to them spending more time together. Wanting to be upfront and not break the bro code, Toru asks if Miyamura is okay with him confessing to Hori. Miyamura has no objection, saying the decision is up to Hori. Later, Toru gets scolded by Yuki for skipping the gym, while Miyamura casually mentions to Hori that he and Toru had a conversation. However, as he walks ahead, Hori asks why he is avoiding him, but Miyamura cannot bring himself to explain. Before she can ask further, Toru suddenly requests to meet Hori after school, leaving before she can respond. Hori plans to pick up Suda, but Miyamura plays the role of a wingman when he should be the hero and offers to do it so Toru can talk to her. That evening, Toru confesses to Hori in class while Miyamura watches over Suta, playing the embarrassing role of a babysitter. When Hori returns, Miyamura accepts his fate as the lad who never got laid, but she asks if he truly believes they are not suited to be a couple. Miyamura, caught off guard, explains that he sees himself as dull and unworthy of her. I can already tell that he's gonna score with the sympathy card. Frustrated, Hori tears up and scolds him for assuming things without asking her. Her emotions turn into anger, and she jokingly threatens to crush him with her thunder thighs if he ever avoids her again, making Miyamura realize how much she truly cares. Told you so. She then tells him that she turned Toru down because when have girls even gone for the guys that actually want them? And when Miyamura says he's a nice guy, she suggests he dates him instead. See, she ships those boys too. A few days later, Miyamura helps Hori carry groceries, and as they chat, she absent-mindedly starts singing anime songs, looking all cute and bangable like Sabrina Carpenter. Miyamura compliments her voice, but she immediately gets embarrassed and stops, insisting she only knows the lyrics because her brother plays the same CDs on repeat. Later, Hori gets a surprise visit from her mom, Yuriko. That evening, her little brother Suda excitedly talks about Miyamura, explaining how he often comes over to hang out with him, low-key snitching on his sister's sneaky link. Yuriko is intrigued and asks if Miyamura is cute, but Hori defines him as a dark villain in detective movies, which we also know is always hotter than the goody two-shoes male lead. When Yuriko asks for his full name, Hori panics, realizing she doesn't even know his first name. Every Tinder relationship ever. The next day at school, Hori becomes obsessed with figuring out Miyamura's first name, but refuses to ask him directly because she gotta keep up with her nonchalant act too, or else she'll lose aura points. She tries eavesdropping in the locker room, but her creeping around just gets her called a weirdo because she's coming across as a peeping Tom. That evening, she even checks the list of top students, hoping to find his full name, but no luck. When she tries asking Toru, he immediately runs off because he's wiping tears from her rejection, just like after finding out I'll never get into Yale. Hori finally realizes that if Miyamura introduces himself to her mom, she'll finally learn his full name, so she invites him over to recreate a Gilmore Girls moment. The next day, Miyamura visits and Yuriko welcomes him in because Hori and Suta went out to run errands. Soon after, Suta comes back, and Yuriko leaves him in Miyamura's care before heading off to work, fully convincing me that the only reason why they all like Miyamura is because he provides free childcare. When Hori returns, she realizes her mom totally sets her up, sending her out just to give Miyamura alone time with her at their house. As they talk, Miyamura mentions that Yuriko politely calls him by his first name. Hori immediately jumps on the opportunity and asks him to repeat exactly what she said. He notes that she's been acting weird and even teases her about sneaking around the locker room, asking if she was getting excited over seeing hot guys. Left with no other choice, Hori admits everything and Miyamura bursts out laughing, realizing Hori has been going all Enola Holmes just to learn his first name. Miyamura then writes his full name, Izumi Miyamura, on a piece of paper and hands it to her. Feeling victorious, Hori tries calling him Izumi Umi but immediately gets flustered like me after running half a mile and decides to stick with his last name for now. Pulling an Uno reverse, she asks if he knows her first name only to find out he's known it is Kyoko Hori the whole time. She feels let down and gets angry at first, probably because she's PMSing, but when Miyamura starts laughing, she laughs with him. The next day, Student Council President Sengoku and member Sakura ask Hori for help with their tasks. She agrees, but they immediately dump a mountain of work on her, behaving like typical corporate overlords. That evening, Yuki notices how exhausted Hori looks and worries that the Student Council is taking advantage of her when we all know that Miyamura should be the only one taking advantage of this cutie. Hori just shrugs it off, saying she doesn't mind as long as she's useful. Pushover alert. Meanwhile, Toru and Miyamura watch from afar and agree to stay out of it because a guy can handle only so much drama. However, Miyamura casually jokes that maybe Hori is doing all this extra work because she has a secret crush on Sengoku, also because he's secretly trying to keep tabs on her like the FBI. Just then, a girl named Ayasaki walks in and Hori hands her some books. After Ayasaki leaves, Toru comments that she's cute because that's how quickly men move on, but Yuki reveals she's actually Sengoku's girlfriend. However, instead of helping out, she basically acts as the student council's mascot because demands princess treatment. Hori then reveals the work she just returned to Ayasaki was actually her responsibility, meaning the council has been offloading Ayasaki's tasks onto Hori. Annoyed but used to it because she's basically spineless, Hori heads home and Miyamura decides to bake her a cake to cheer her up, because baking someone's cake may get you theirs. Later, Miyamura bumps into Ayasaki, who drops a bunch of books and starts talking cheeks like a Karen. She hurriedly picks them up and runs off, accidentally leaving one behind. Miyamura calls after her, but she tells him to just throw it away. Curious, he checks it and realizes it's the student council's budget report. That night, despite being extremely exhausted, Hori stays up all night working when all that energy could be spent on much more fun activities. The next morning, Miyamura arrives at school and finds a crowd gathered outside their class. Hori and Toru tell him that Ayasaki has blamed Hori for losing the budget report like a typical toxic boss. Even though Hori insists she didn't lose anything, Sengoku immediately takes his girlfriend's side like a simp and demands an apology. Miyamura, knowing the truth, steps in like the Sigma he is and tells Hori not to apologize. He then headbutts Sengoku in front of everyone and pulls out the missing report, exposing Ayasaki for misplacing it and giving her negative aura for life. Realizing that she's been caught in 4K, Ayasaki bursts into tears like me after hearing of Liam Payne's demise, admitting that she totally forgot about it in a hurry. Sengoku and the others finally apologize to Hori, but she brushes it off, knowing they are just doing their jobs. Later, Hori thanks Miyamura for backing her up and saving her pretty little butt. Miyamura then asks why she even tolerates a mouth breather like Sengoku, and Hori explains that they've known each other for years. Back then, Sengoku used to be super timid, and Hori used to bully him relentlessly. One day, he finally snapped and threatened to expose her if she didn't stop, ending their roleplay once and for all. After that, she switched up real quick and even started helping him with small tasks as a weird sort of truce. The next day, Miyamura runs into Sengoku in the locker room and quickly realizes that after getting headbutted, Sengoku is now terrified of him, as much as Justin Bieber fears Diddy. During PE, Miyamura and Toru play table tennis while brainstorming what to get Hori for her upcoming birthday because she's the only female that lets them near her. They play for hours but still don't come up with a good idea because their testosterone levels are higher than their IQs combined. Meanwhile, at home, Suda excitedly talks about spending time with Miyamura every day during spring break because he's a needy little pain in the butt. However, Hori warns him that Miyamura will probably visit less often as time goes on. Suta then asks if Miyamura will stop visiting completely in the future, and Hori suddenly realizes how lonely she'd feel if he were no longer around because she'll have to go back to being a Cinderella with no prince and no charm. A few days later, Miyamura visits on Hori's birthday. Suta gives her a drawing because he's a cheapskate, while Miyamura gets her a CD of all the latest popular songs because he secretly hopes that she'll put on a private show for him someday. The thoughtful gift makes Hori emotional because it's exactly what she wanted. As they celebrate, they realize spring break is ending soon, and soon they'll be starting their final year of school together, which means their hormones will be raging even more. One day, the teacher told everyone to pair up for an activity, but Miyamura ended up alone because his social status is still as low as my self-esteem. The teacher encouraged the students to include him, but they all treated him like he pulls prank on babies for clout. This kept happening for years, making Miyamura feel like life had it out for him. So, in a fit of frustration, he went home and gave himself some piercings, hoping it would make him look cooler, when it's just a gateway to self-harm. In his next school, people still thought he was strange, but then Hori, the popular girl, walked up to him and casually said hi. She pointed out that while everyone thought he he was some dark and mysterious loner, he actually seemed pretty normal to her. And just like that, their story kicked off. On the first day of their third year, students crowd around the notice board to check their class placements. Hori feels excited to see she's in class 1 with Yuki, and to her mild surprise, Miyamura and Toru are there too, which means she gets to be the center of a love triangle and lead on 2 guys again. Soon after, the whole squad, including a guy who's got boogers for hair named Shu, gathers and starts talking like a clique in a 2000s rom-com movie, and Miyamura realizes he's actually part of a group now. Later, when the teacher tells them to form groups of 4, Miyamura braces himself to be left out again, but before he can react, Hori, Yuki, and Toru sit down with him naturally, making him experience his first big O at this auspicious moment because that's how pleased he is. While hanging out on the rooftop, Miyamura starts wondering if he can actually call these people his friends because he's too unemployed to do better things with his life. Toru shows up and casually mentions that their next class has been changed from math to economics. He grumbles about how annoying schedule changes are, then starts rambling about something else. Miyamura spaces out so hard that when Toru asks for his opinion, he has no clue what they're even talking about. Out of nowhere, Miyamura asks Toru what he really thinks of him. Toru bluntly says that his whole Ben Affleck sadly eating a sandwich alone but is kind of annoying, but then admits that Miyamura is actually too nice for his own good, which makes Toru feel like he has to look out for him. Also, he's mad that Miyamura serves more looks than most wannabe baddies at school when he ties his hair up. However, Toru makes it clear that even though he's weird, they're still friends because he's Toru's Make-A-Wish kid. Later, Hori scolds them for not finishing their report because no one else actually listens to her other than these 2 guys. When she asks what they were doing instead, Toru casually says they were bonding, which we all know is code for a sword fight. The next day, Toru and Miyamura run into each other at the lockers, and Toru realizes they still aren't even on a first-name basis. Meanwhile, Suta wakes her up early, begging her to drop him off at school. Since she arrives at her own school way too early, she ends up chatting with Ayasaki. They talk about Miyamura, and Ayasaki playfully suggests that he and Hori look like a couple. Hori immediately denies it, saying they're just friends. Seizing the opportunity, Ayasaki asks if Miyamura would ever link up with her, and despite just denying any feelings, Hori suddenly gets possessive like me over a Hershey's bar. Before things can escalate, 2 other girls walk into the cafe, and Hori makes a swift exit. That evening, Hori realizes that since her brother is always busy, she and Miyamura spend a lot of time alone together. They decide to watch a horror movie, which we all know is an excuse to cuddle in the dark, and Hori sits there unhinged while Miyamura nearly has a heart attack at every jump scare. When the lights suddenly go out, he full-on panics, convinced a ghost is coming for him. The lights flicker back on, and Hori, amused, puts on another horror movie. As she swaps the disc, Miyamura randomly remembers how Yuki once pointed out that Hori's fingers are double-jointed. That's a weird way to check out a girl, but weird is what Miyamura is. One time, Yuki and Hori compared hand sizes, and when Toru tried to touch her hand, Hori flat out refused, and as if he sniffs glue in his free time. Thinking about that, Miyamura and Hori start comparing their hands, which is the most basic flirting method, and before she knows it, she absentmindedly grabs his. Then, out of nowhere, Hori blurts out that she loves him because it's about time she gets laid. Realizing what she just said, she panics and tries to cover it up by saying she's just in love with his hands, but that honestly sounds even more freaky. Miyamura starts playing along and says he loves her hands too. The 2 are about to open a joint account on Netflix, only for Suda to come home like an annoying blue balls delivery man and unknowingly ruin it. Miyamura takes him to the bath, wishing he could drown him there for taking away his one chance to hit, and the 2 just wash their hands in awkward silence. The next day, Ayasaki tells Sakura about her conversation with Hori, admitting she was just joking about getting freaky with Miyamura and didn't expect Hori to react so seriously. Toru, who has been eavesdropping, overhears and immediately starts overthinking. Later, Miyamura shows up to class with a massive bruise on his face but refuses to explain. Hori, not one to let things go, pesters him until he admits he got into a fight with Toru because that's the most masculine way to solve a problem. She's ready to scold Toru, thinking he took it too far, but then Toru walks in, looking worse than Jake Paul after his fight with Mike Tyson. Later, Yuki wants a scoop of the dirt of the fight, which makes Miyamura casually explain that he kept knocking down Toru over and over again like Lindsay Lohan with her addiction issues and was only hit by Toru once. Meanwhile, Hori tries to talk to Toru, but all he has to say about the fight are as many complaints as people made about the once viral pink sauce. Last night, the fight started because Toru confronted Miyamura about Hori's feelings for him. Miyamura kept brushing it off like it wasn't a big deal, so Toru lost patience and tried using force to get an answer. Unfortunately for him, Miyamura turned out surprisingly strong like Kung Fu Panda, and the fight was embarrassingly one-sided. In the end, they both realize how dumb it is, and Toru admits he took it too far, also because he's been beaten to a pulp like Miyamura's ding-dong. Later, Yuki and Hori talk about how both guys admit it was their own fault, but when Hori asks what the fight was about, Yuki decides to keep it a secret because Hori doesn't deserve the ego boost of 2 guys fighting over her. Meanwhile, Miyamura finds Toru sulking on the rooftop, ready to finally make peace. A few days later, Toru is walking to school when a bunch of papers suddenly rain down on him. He looks up and sees Sakura leaning out of a classroom window, panicking because her reports just took flight. He picks them up and returns them to her, and she thanks him for the help. Seemingly curious after this meet-cute, he asks how she handles all the student council responsibilities, and she admits Remi and Sengoku always have her back. Later, Miyamura surprises Toru with ice cream, mentioning that Hori got it for them. Toru's excitement dies fast when he realizes it's melon-flavored, which is his least favorite, probably because melons remind him of his intact virginity. Not wanting to waste it, he and Miyamura run into Sengoku and immediately bully him into eating it instead. As Sengoku takes a bite, they all start arguing about whose tongue matches the ice cream color the most. Toru is too cool for their foolery and roasts them for acting like geeks at Comic-Con. To get back at him, they tease him for being a top womanizer like Harry Styles, and Sengoku threatens to tell Sakura about it. Toru asks who that even is, and Sengoku explains she's the green-haired student council girl with an Anne Hathaway face with the body of a Kardashian. Naturally, this leads to Toru and Miyamura starting a roast battle on him for always being surrounded by shawties, but Sengoku insists it's all professional, just like the CEO at the Coldplay concert. When they start complaining about the summer heat, Sengoku takes pity on them and allows them to use the air conditioner in the student council room. The next day, Toru and the others take full advantage, chilling in the cool student council room. At some point, Hori and Miyamura leave to grab drinks, and while waiting, Ayasaki casually asks Toru if those two are dating because apparently this girl watches Love Island in her free time. Caught off guard, Toru hesitates to answer because he knows it's not that simple. When she says Toru looks better with Horo, Yuki shuts it down, claiming he can't score Hori even if he was as hot as Tom Hiddleston when he's dancing on Rasputin. Meanwhile, Sakura watches Toru a little too closely and realizes that something is going on here. She jokes that Miyamura might be unlocking Hori's deluxe skin, sending Toru into immediate panic mode. By the time they finally return, Toru is visibly on edge, spiraling into worst-case scenarios. Miyamura notices and tries to explain their delay, but Toru, not wanting to hear it, slaps his hands over his ears and refuses to listen, just like I did in my teenage rebellious era. Seeing his reaction, the others take the chance to mess with him, throwing out increasingly ridiculous and suggestive comments until Toru frantically pops open his drink, only for it to explode all over him, which is yet another reminder of all the action he'll never get from Hori. Grumbling about his misfortune, he's suddenly handed a cloth by Sakura, who sees an opportunity to slide in and casually explains that their delay had nothing to do with his delusions. In reality, Miyamura just dropped his cola and they had to clean up the mess. We all know what cola means here. Buddy, that evening, Miyamura is at Hori's house helping with homework when she mentions her air conditioner is broken. Without thinking, Miyamura shrugs and says he just sleeps bare in the heat. The room goes silent as Hori processes what he just said, then eyes him suspiciously. She blurts out that he totally seems like the type to strip without hesitation, much like Tom Holland when he performed Umbrella on Lip Sync Battle, and then demands to see his tattoos. Without even questioning it, Miyamura starts unbuttoning his shirt, which only annoys her more. Determined to fluster him for once, she starts throwing out absurd and suggestive scenarios, but Miyamura is unfazed and hits her with a smooth operator smile. Frustrated, she complains about how he's always so calm, while she experiences condensation in her skirt for the first time just by looking into his pretty eyes. Seeing she's actually self-conscious, Miyamura offers that he'll share something that makes him nervous too. He tells her about meeting up with his old friend Shindo, and as the two started talking, the guy assumed Miyamura was going over to Hori's place to fix her plumbing. No matter how many times Miyamura denied it, Shindo refused to let it go, teasing him until he actually got flustered. At the time, he brushed it off, but now, every time someone suggests he and Hori are dating, he can't help but get that same nervous feeling because he probably gets all bricked up under his school uniform. As he finishes, he gets a call from Shindo, who sends him a picture of him and his girlfriend, suggesting a double date. Without hesitation, Miyamura deletes the message before Hori can see, then calls Shindo, curses him out, and immediately hangs up. Watching him react so strongly, Hori realizes that, despite how close they've gotten, there's still so much she doesn't know about his past, which honestly adds to his mystery and bangability. The next day, Hori is walking home from a grocery run when she unexpectedly runs into Shindo. Meanwhile, Miyamura and Toru see this from a distance. Without warning, Miyamura speeds up and, to Toru's horror, slaps Shindo across the face, Will Smith at the Oscars style. Unbothered, Shindo just laughs it off, and Miyamura introduces him to the group, revealing that he's actually a second-year student who got held back, probably because he's special. They all end up at a restaurant, where Miyamura reminisces about how they met. Years ago, Miyamura was a total loner until one day, Shindo, who couldn't even remember his name, started talking to him. That small conversation led to them bonding over a favorite singer, which is how all Suifites befriend each other. Even when his friends warned him that Miyamura looked like the type who secretly plans to let his guns out in class, one random day, Shindo ignored them and stuck around. Thanks to him, that era wasn't as miserable as it could have been for Miyamura. Thinking about it, Miyamura realizes school isn't bad either because of Hori. The next day, Hori comes down with a fever, probably because she's hot for Miyamura, which freaks Suda out. When she tries to get ready for school anyway, he forces her back into bed, pleading with her not to die while he's gone because she's the only thing keeping him away from a foster family. After taking medicine, she she falls into a restless sleep, dreaming about all the times her mom left for work when she needed her most. When she wakes up from her binge watch session of mommy issues, she sees Miyamura sitting by her side, who rushed over as soon as Suda said she was dying. He reassures her before standing to leave, but she weakly asks why he's abandoning her. Confused, Miyamura tells her he was just going to the kitchen for water. Realizing she's feeling fragile, he takes her hand and promises to stay as long as she wants, because even he has more humanity than "You're a bad mom, Yuriko." Thinking she's asleep, Miyamura quietly whispers that he loves her before slipping out of the room. The moment he's gone, Hori bolts upright with her eyes wide open and can't believe he actually grew a pair and confessed. At that moment, she does not know what to do, so she decides to pretend that she was sleeping the entire time so they can stay as they are for a little longer, because she's lagging at this point. The next morning, Hori decides she's just not in the mood to deal with school, so she fakes being sick and stays home, using the time to think about Miyamura's confession. As she replays the moment over and over in her head just as much as I've rewatched the Calvin Klein ad with Jeremy Allen White, Suda barges in and tells her that he saw Miyamura hanging out with some girl. Doesn't she know that snitches get stitches? That alone is enough to make Hori's mind spiral into all sorts of unnecessary scenarios, but she decides to keep calm and not jump to conclusions. However, when Suda casually throws in the fact that they were arm in arm, it suddenly feels like all logic goes flying out the window. That night, she sits on her bed, phone in hand, debating whether or not to text Miyamura and just ask him directly, but then she decides it's easier to keep up her nun lifestyle of getting none. The next day, when she walks into class, Toru immediately approaches her and tells her that Miyamura has been really worried about her, because apparently it's his turn to play wingman now. Instead of feeling reassured, she just feels even more conflicted, so she avoids the problem entirely because she's just a girl. She picks a seat far from Miyamura and pretends she doesn't notice his glances. Later, when class ends, Toru casually mentions to Miyamura that Hori seemed tense and kind of distant, almost like she was deliberately ignoring him. Miyamura, of course, already knows exactly why she's acting this way, but just shrugs it off. After school, Hori sneaks into a locked room where she's sure she won't be found, but Miyamura catches her in the act almost immediately. She panics and tries to make a quick getaway, but he suddenly asks if she had been awake that time when he whispered that he loved her. The unexpected question makes her freeze like the 3-month-old mystery container in my freezer, but instead of answering, she asks him about the girl he was hanging out with. Miyamura immediately asks if she's talking about Chika, completely ruining her plan of making him look confused and taking a W. Now that she has a name, that too, as obnoxious as Chika, she gets even more worked up, thinking that Miyamura is actually dating this mysterious girl. However, Miyamura quickly clears things up by explaining that Chika is actually Shindo's girlfriend, and the whole arm-holding thing was because she tripped and sprained her ankle, so he just helped her walk. Hori, now fully realizing she overreacted, turns red from embarrassment, throws books at him, and runs away in embarrassment, because that's a completely reasonable thing to do after accusing someone of being a two-timing, cheap, lying wannabe. When she gets home, she starts feeling guilty about how she acted and assumes that both Miyamura and Toru must think she's some kind of violent maniac. Before she can wallow in regret for too long and finish listening to a whole Adele album, Miyamura shows up at her house to return the book she threw at him. Hori, now speaking hesitantly, makes it obvious that she feels bad, and Miyamura quickly picks up on it. They both awkwardly apologize at the same time, clearing up the misunderstanding once and for all, because that's how easy things should be when your vibe matches with someone. As their conversation naturally shifts, Miyamura admits that he had been scared to hear her response to his confession, worried that she might not feel the same way. Just as Hori is about to say something back, the moment is completely ruined when her long-lost father, Kyosuke, who walked out to buy milk and never returned since, suddenly walks in, casually asking about Yuriko as if he hadn't been gone forever. This family seriously needs to work on their timing. He immediately turns his attention to Miyamura, completely ignoring everything else, and compliments his piercings like he's the coolest guy in town. So, our guy Kyosuke is not only deadbeat but a beta too. Before he can say anything else, Hori shuts him down with a swift kick, making him drop his cigarette in shock. Hori then goes to get something for Kyosuke to eat that I suggest should be laced with poison, leaving Miyamura alone with him. Seeing this as the perfect opportunity, Kyosuke decides to interrogate Miyamura like a protective father should, though he doesn't seem all that serious about it. He starts off by asking if Miyamura has any siblings and, upon hearing that he's an only child, jokingly tells him to stay away from Hori. However, he immediately takes it back, laughing and admitting that he's just messing around because apparently that's what he's been doing all these years away from his wife. As they continue talking, Miyamura asks why Hori calls her own father by his first name, Hori, and Kyosuke just reminds him that Hori is actually their family name, suggesting that maybe Miyamura should start calling her Kyoko instead. But then, he immediately contradicts himself, saying that it'd be way too weird to suddenly switch names now. This gives major Libra energy because of how indecisive Miyamura acts in this moment. Eventually, Kyosuke gets straight to the point and asks Hori if Miyamura is actually her boyfriend. Unlike before, when she would have been too flustered to answer, she confidently says yes this time because her daddy issues have kicked in too. Kyosuke pretends to be devastated, claiming he just can't accept the relationship because because Miyamura's hair is too long. Miyamura, wanting to be respectful, says he'll cut it if that's what it takes. But Koyusuke, suddenly changing his mind again, tells him not to waste it and suggests just tying it back instead. Then he asks if Miyamura is really sure about dating Hori, and without hesitation Miyamura responds that he loves her. Before the conversation can get any deeper, Yuriko walks in and casually jokes that they don't have enough food for Kyusuke, when what she really should do is kick out the a-hole absent father. Later, as they walk together, Hori apologizes for how ridiculous her dad is, but Miyamura just laughs, saying that Kyosuke isn't all that different from her. Feeling touched by his words but sadly not by his manly hands, Hori quietly takes his hand, and for the first time, they share a peaceful moment without any interruptions, only because Suda isn't around to cockblock. Miyamura admits that there's still so much he doesn't know about her, but he really wants to learn if she'll let him. Soon after, they reach the main road, and Miyamura decides to head home from there, thanking her for everything. As he walks away, Hori suddenly feels an overwhelming wave of emotions, and quickly runs off before she starts dripping like a leaky faucet in my kitchen. Meanwhile, Miyamura, left standing alone, finally understands just how difficult it is to say goodbye to someone you love and how fast a heart can beat when it's truly in love. On the other side of town, Toru is at home working on some math problems, but his mind isn't really in it because he's got love problems to deal with. Instead, he finds himself thinking about how, at one point, he used to be the closest person to Hori, until Miyamura rizzed her up with his piercings and tattoos and replaced him. The next day, Sakura, watching from the window, immediately picks up on the fact that Toru isn't acting like himself. Just then, Ayasaki shows up, asking who she's staring at, because she just has to know everyone's business. Flustered, Sakura rushes off to the student council room, but Ayasaki isn't letting this go so easily. She insists that Sakura tell her what's going on, and as Sakura looks at her, noticing how her body type is so similar to Hori's, insecurities start creeping in. She convinces herself that Toru will never fall for a flat queen like herself and, frustrated with her own thoughts, leaves without explaining anything. However, as she walks away, she realizes that no matter what she feels about herself, Ayasaki has always been there for her like a true soul sister, never once judging her for acting all thirsty over emotionally unavailable men like Toru. Gathering her courage, she rushes back and finally admits that she likes someone but isn't confident about how she looks. Seeing Sakura, usually so calm and composed, blushing and flustered, Ayasaki can't help but smile and tell her she actually looks cute, giving her the ego boost she needed. Later, Hori and Miyamura run into Toru and Shuwa. While Shu keeps Hori busy with English questions, Toru takes the chance to patch things up with Miyamura. Later, as Miyamura studies, Hori mentions that Suta made a friend named Izumi, which is also Miyamura's first name. When Miyamura asks her to call him that too, she immediately scolds him for making things weird, as if they haven't been dripping over each other this whole time. The next morning, Suda asks Keisuke how long he plans to stay, but Keisuke causally brushes off the question like it doesn't even matter, probably because he's homeless. Later, when Yuriko asks him the same thing, he dramatically wonders if there's even a place for him in this house anymore. He doesn't seem to fit in like Hermione the Muggle at Hogwarts. Just then, Hori comes home from school with Miyamura, and the moment Koyusuke lays eyes on him, he doesn't even recognize the poor guy. Seeing how Miyamura is already sweating from just existing, Koyusuke decides that the best solution is to drag him into the bath with him because that's the gayest thing he could think of at the moment. Despite Miyamura's protests, Kyosuke shoves him straight into the bath, and the next thing Hori hears is her father screaming his lungs out, probably convinced Miyamura is secretly part of the Yakuza because of his tattoos. Later, as the evening rolls in, Miyamura realizes it's already past 8 p.m. and thinks it's time for him to head home, but the family insists that he stay over. Somehow, this results in Miyamura and Kyosuke sharing a room for the night for yet another shady encounter, and instead of just letting the poor guy sleep, Kyosuke decides to interrogate him about his daughter. When Miyamura explains how Hori doesn't judge people based on appearances, Kyosuke, feeling oddly touched by this revelation, just passes out right then and there like he's had some kind of spiritual awakening, even though he should be smart enough to know that his issues with Hori go deeper than appearances. The next morning, Miyamura wakes up to Hori barging into the room wearing gym clothes, pulling up the curtains without a shred of mercy to create a morning after moment even though they slept in separate rooms. Soon enough, the two of them get ready and start heading to school together, completely unaware that some of their classmates happen to see them leaving the house at the same time. As expected, word spreads like wildfire, and before they know it, they are the talk of the town, like Tom Holland and Zendaya after stepping out as a couple. Toru and Yuki are both incredibly annoyed that they have to listen to people talk nonsense about their best friends, though Yuki takes it a little harder than necessary, probably because she's done with her bestie being the center of attention all the time. Meanwhile, Hori finds herself dealing with a bunch of guys she had previously rejected, all acting like they have some kind of personal stake in the situation, while Miyamura does his best to keep a low profile and avoid unnecessary attention, which is impossible now that he's dating the school's most wanted bachelorette. The next day, Miyamura walks into class only to be met with a sea of shocked faces, and when he stops next to Hori, she can't believe her eyes because he's cut his hair short. Instantly, the thirsty girls in the class start drooling over him like he's the matcha they can't afford, but before they can get too bold, one cold glare from Hori is enough to remind them abandoned that Miyamura's magic wand has already been booked for her. Meanwhile, Shua, the king of unnecessary theatrics, reacts as if the world is ending, and just as he's handing Miyamura a CD, Toru notices a girl sneakily taking a picture of Miyamura with her phone like Paps outside Nobu on a Saturday. Later, when Miyamura and Hori arrive home, he gets yet another over-the-top reaction because of his new hair. As they run into Shindo, he starts crying like he's mourning the death of the old Miyamura, which makes me think that he's probably one of the theater kids. After wiping away his imaginary tears, Shindo excitedly reveals that he recently won a giant bag of candy in some contest and wants to share it with them. As they sift through the different flavors, Miyamura learns that Shindo absolutely despises the cheese-flavored ones, so naturally, he makes him eat one just for the laughs. As Shindo turns away crying over the horrible taste, Hori tries a candy that tastes like literal clay and immediately regrets it, just like me after cutting my own bangs at 3 a.m. Before she can even react, Miyamura casually steals it right out of her mouth and leaves the room to get some water for Shindo because he's a smooth operator. The following day, Miyamura notices a girl staring at him with a face full of resentment, but for the life of him, he has no idea who she is, maybe because she looks like pre-surgery Kylie Jenner. Meanwhile, as Hori and Yuki walk through the hallway, the same girl suddenly appears and demands confirmation about the rumors. Once she gets her answer, she bolts away and starts stalking Miyamura like some kind of horror movie villain. When Miyamura finally stops and confronts her, she straight up asks him when he's going to break up with Hori, to which he responds, without hesitation, never. That's when she introduces herself as Sawada from class 225 and dramatically vows to return as if she's some anime villain planning her next move, when we all know that she's going to go home, bury her head in a floral pillow, and cry all evening. Later, as Miyamura tells Hori about the strange encounter, Sawada appears once again, acting all high and mighty. However, before she can get too confident, Hori quickly reminds her exactly who she's dealing with, which leaves Sawada completely flustered. It turns out she isn't actually in love with Miyamura, she's just madly obsessed with Hori, which is so predictable because literally everyone in this anime is after Hori. Toru, who has been eavesdropping on the whole conversation, immediately jumps in just to enjoy the chaos because he'd never give up on a chance to see some girl-on-girl action. Hori, already exhausted, begs Miyamura to save her from Sawada's relentless grip, but no matter how hard he tries, she keeps pulling Hori right back. As the battle for Hori's affection rages on, Toru, finding the whole situation way too entertaining, decides to text Yuki, telling her to come and witness it firsthand, as if the poor girl needed one more reminder of the duff. Sawada refuses to let go of Hori until the class bell rings, forcing Miyamura to physically drag her to class. After school, as Miyamura walks out alone, he is once again startled by Sawada, who, despite everything, is still determined to find Hori. When she learns that Hori went home early, she starts following Miyamura like a shadow. They take the exact same route, walk into the exact same building, enter the exact same elevator, and that's when they both realize that they're actually next-door neighbors. As if things couldn't get weirder, Sawada suddenly remembers she left her key in her school locker, so Miyamura invites her inside and offers her some cake, which is how Hansel and Gretel's story started too. As they chat, she asks if he ever gets visitors, and he admits that even Hori doesn't come over often. Curious, she asks if he has any siblings, and Miyamura says he's the only child. Sawada, laughing at his misery, mentions that she assumed he had a little sister because of how well he handled things, which sends Miyamura into a fit of laughter. However, the mood shifts when Sawada gets a little sad and mentions she used to have a brother. Just as quickly though, she takes it back, claiming she was just joking because why would she start glitching in front of her biggest rival yet? Not long after, her parents call telling her to return home, and before she leaves, Miyamura casually tells her she's welcome to drop by anytime, because apparently he loves having girls over at his place. Later that night, Miyamura's mother mentions that Sawada's older brother actually passed away in an accident last year, leaving him deep in thought as he falls asleep. The next day, Miyamura notices that she's back to following him again and tries to tell her off, but when a couple of guys start teasing her, she immediately latches onto Miyamura for protection. Without a word, Miyamura shoots the boys a cold glare, scaring them off instantly, and the two decide to wait for Hori together, now that they've unofficially entered sibling territory. Later that evening, as Hori and Miyamura Netflix and chill at her place, they come across a scene where a girl plans to kill her own father. Without missing a beat, Hori turns to Kyosuke and tells him she relates to the character, scaring him so badly that he immediately runs out to buy cigarettes. I wonder if he'll return this time. Seizing the moment, Hori questions why Miyamura never makes a move on her, not realizing that he has no idea she's waiting for him to take the lead. Just as he leans in for a kiss, Kyosuke bursts back in, asking for change, completely ruining the moment. A few days later, the gang finds themselves wandering around a store looking for DVDs, but Yuki just can't seem to find the one she's been searching for. Hori, on the other hand, easily picks out what she wants, and Miyamura naturally walks up to the counter with her. Furu watches them from a distance, feeling a little left out because this guy can't stand being single, and Yuki immediately notices his change in mood. Wanting to cheer him up, she pulls him toward the magazine section and starts showing him the ones he likes, hoping to lift his spirits and possibly his interest in her. The next day, Yuki asks Toru to help her take out the trash, and as they walk together, she starts rambling about how the DVD DVD she was looking for is finally releasing today. She excitedly asks Toru to come with her to the store, and while she keeps going on about it, he suddenly realizes she's been giving him a lot more attention lately. Ever since Hori and Miyamura started dating, time for the rejects to pair up. He doesn't think too much about it, but before he can respond to Yuki, they turn a corner and Toru accidentally bumps into Sakura, sending some of the trash flying and staining her uniform along with her integrity. Toru, feeling bad about what happened, rushes off to grab a towel while Yuki stays behind and apologizes for the mess. As they talk, Sakura casually asks Yuki if she and Toru are dating. Yuki quickly waves off the idea and insists they're just friends because she's got to copy Hori here too. Before they can continue the conversation, Toru returns with a jacket, offering it to Sakura so she can cover up the stain. At first, Sakura gets flustered because wearing a guy's jacket feels a little too personal for this girl who has never been touched by a man before. Still, she accepts it and wears it to the student council room, leaving Sengoku baffled by the sight. Once she gets settled, Sakura asks Sengoku what he likes about Ayasaki, which completely catches him off guard since Sakura isn't usually one to ask about this kind of stuff. He thinks for a moment before explaining that Ayasaki is the type of girl who is a clumsy cutie, which to him is oddly endearing. He admits that he isn't the strongest or the bravest guy around, but being with her gives him the push to do things he otherwise wouldn't, making him feel less like an incel who lives in his mom's basement. Hearing this, Sakura reflects on her own situation and realizes that Ayasaki gives her courage too, and she decides it's time to use that courage to pop her cherry. The next day, she spots Toru in the hallway and stops him, returning the jacket he lent her, now that she's done sniffing it in her room. As she expresses her gratitude, Toru gets called over by his classmates and is about to run off when Sakura suddenly calls out to him, stopping him in his tracks. With slightly pink cheeks, she hands him a pack of homemade cookies, specifically made just for him because she wants to come across as wifey material. As he opens it, he notices some of them are pink, Sakura flavored, and he casually remarks how much he loves Sakura. As he walks away, Sakura feels flattered and is happy she summoned the courage to talk to Toru. Meanwhile, Yuki finally finds the DVD she's been searching for, but just as she's about to grab it, another girl reaches for it too. Without thinking twice, Yuki lets her have it, even though she had been waiting so long to get her hands on it. Hori, noticing something, seems off but decides not to bother her because she's low-key a self-absorbed friend. The next day, she asks why she and Toru haven't been hanging out as much, but Yuki brushes it off, jokingly saying that Toru has been too busy eating cookies to have time for her. Looks like it's time for Toru to be a part of another love triangle. She covers up her feelings with a smile, but Hori can tell that something is bothering her. She realizes that Yuki tends to hesitate when it comes to going after the things she wants, always waiting too long until they slip out of reach. The truth is, Yuki wants Toru to be the Peter Kavinsky to her Regine, but she's waiting too long again in hopes that she'll magically get what she wants. Later, Sakura gives her homemade cookies to thank her for the handkerchief, and even though she happily accepts them, she later eats them in misery knowing she'll never be as thick as Sakura later. She randomly asks Miyamura to teach her how to bake a cake, as if feeding Toru is the only way to rizz him up. Miyamura, slightly confused but willing to help, gives her some basic instructions. A week later, she returns with a batch of cupcakes, but unfortunately, they're completely burnt like me after spending a day at the pool. She asks Miyamura and Hori not to say anything to Toru, but things are about to get interesting, probably because Lala Sadi wrote the script for this. Toru stumbles upon them on the rooftop and, without hesitation, picks one up and takes a bite. He immediately cringes at the taste and bluntly comments on how awful they are. But instead of being discouraged, Yuki finds herself motivated to try again, determined to make something better next time. Wow, Toru must be packing a lot for girls to be so desperate over him. Days later, everyone finds out that Miyamura is out of town visiting his relatives and won't be back for a whole week. That night, Miyamura texts Hori to let her know he arrived safely, but soon realizes his phone battery is about to die. Unfortunately, he left his charger at home, meaning he won't be able to contact her at all, which we all know is a recipe for disaster with her abandonment issues and all. Meanwhile, Hori anxiously waits for his messages, counting the days until his return. But as the days pass with no word from him, she starts feeling uneasy, suspecting that she's being ghosted. On the day Miyamura is supposed to return, Hori hears news about flight delays and immediately rushes to his house, hoping to check if he made it back safely. At the same time, Miyamura finally gets home, charges his phone, and sees all the worried messages Hori had sent him throughout the week. Without wasting another second, he bolts out of his house to find her, and the two finally meet in front of the elevator for what could be a passionate makeout session. Hori doesn't hesitate for a second and pulls him into a tight hug, overwhelmed with relief. At that moment, she truly understands how painful it is to be separated from the people you love. The next day, the girls gather in the student council room, and Hori casually mentions that Miyamura absolutely hates horror movies. The other girls immediately start giving her advice on how she can use that to get under Miyamura's Miyamura's debris, so she decides to put their suggestions to the test the next time he comes over to watch a movie. However, all their advice ends up backfiring spectacularly, leaving Miyamura more terrified than ever. Feeling embarrassed, Hori flops onto her bed, lamenting her failed attempts to score some wood for her fireplace. But Miyamura reassures her that he fell in love with her just the way she is, making her realize that she never needed to try so hard in the first place. As they watch the rain pour outside, Hori asks him to stay the night, and the two end up making their own Doja Cat music video. The next morning, Suda sees Miyamura still at the house and bursts into tears, worried that Miyamura is going to take his sister away because this kid is annoying as a Meghan Trainor song. But Miyamura simply embraces him and reassures him that no matter what happens, she's not going anywhere. Hori overhears their conversation from the hallway and smiles, knowing that she picked the right guy to pick her cherry. One evening, Miyamura reflects on how much his life has changed compared to the past. Back then, he was an e-boy who listened to My Chemical Romance, dreading break periods that only reminded him of his isolation. Group projects were torture, forcing him to interact when all he wanted was to stay indoors like it was COVID protocol. Every school day felt miserable, leaving him with no good memories. At his lowest, he even considered ending it all, but looking at where he is now, he's grateful he held on. He found real friends, people who actually cared, and more than anything, he met Hori, the one person who turned out to be the socket to his plug. Meanwhile, Ayasaki reflects on Sengoku and how much of a pushover he used to be. He let people walk all over him, laughing along just to fit in, yet never truly feeling like he belonged. The attention sometimes made him happy, but more often than not, it only made him anxious. Despite this, he always tried to push himself, especially for Ayasaki's sake, something she genuinely appreciated. She loved having him around, knowing how much he had changed since they first met, which she sees as the glow-up of the century. Back in school, Ayasaki once overheard Sengoku acting like a frat boy, dismissing a comment about her being cute, calling her mid at best. Later, he awkwardly tried to change the subject by showing her the book he was reading. Nice try, did he? When he learned she loved books too, he brought her another one the next day, even offering it to Sakura once Ayasaki was done reading, because apparently he's all generous like Mr. Beast now. A few days later, he shared more books, revealing that his family had an entire library. Intrigued, Ayasaki mentioned how cool that was, prompting Sengoku to invite her over. During her visit, she found an old book about the apocalypse and started flipping through it. When Sengoku asked how she'd spend her last day if the world were ending, she instantly replied that she'd eat every dessert possible like a fatso. As they chatted, he suddenly complimented her ponytails, making her feel unexpectedly warm inside. The next day, she returned the books, and their end-of-the-world discussions continued. Sengoku randomly mentioned that his friend Kamioka had a crush on her, but Ayasaki brushed it off, acting all nonchalant, and asked if she could visit again. Later, in the library, Sengoku was picking out books for Ayasaki when she suddenly asked what he would actually do if the world ended tomorrow. Without thinking, he blurted out that he'll confess his feelings to her before turning into dust. He blushes like a Bridgerton heroine, and Ayasaki, realizing what he meant, simply smiled and told him she liked him too. From that moment on, their bond deepened, and as they kept reading together, they eventually fell in love. At present, Hori is painting Miyamura's toenails and keeps teasing him as relentlessly as Kanye rants on Twitter. Knowing full well she'd retaliate, he jokingly puts his foot on her head, only to drop to his knees and apologize immediately. Hori tells him it's fine, pointing out how aggressive he is with the boys yet so gentle with her. She tells him not to hold back, making Miyamura question if she wants to roleplay as the dough he needs at his mom's bakery. The thought sends Hori's mind spiraling, and before she knows it, she's blushing at the idea of Miyamura feasting on her all-inclusive breakfast. The next day, Miyamura enters the classroom acting oddly cheerful, making Toru and Shuwu suspicious, because they assume that he got the Gok 3000 last night. When Sengoku arrives to borrow his math notebook, he also notices something is off. Turns out, Miyamura is trying to practice being overly nice to the boys so he can work up the courage to yell at Hori for once and recreate her fantasy of 365 days. Later, when he and Hori are alone in an empty classroom, he tries to act aggressive, but just as he's about to pull it off, a group of girls walks in and immediately assumes he's being abusive like Amber Heard accused Johnny Depp to be. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the hallway, Yuki has a conversation that leaves her looking uneasy. Later, as Miyamura and Hori discuss rumors about their violent love story, they notice Yuki seems distracted. When they ask what's wrong, she reveals that someone recently asked her out, but she has no idea how to turn him down because she's had 0 romances in her sorry life. She doesn't even know much about the guy, but she has to admit he's confident. Not wanting to hurt his feelings, Hori suggests that Yuki pretend to date Toru for a few days so the guy will back off. Yuki hesitates, worried Toru will hate the idea, but Miyamura calls him up immediately, and to her surprise, Toru agrees to play along because it's his Get Into Yuri free card. Later, Yuki reveals that the guy who asked her out is Yanagi from class 6. Toru suggests she find someone better better looking for the role, but Yuki reassures him that he's actually hotter than Yanagi. With that, Toru feels as freaky as the weekend, grabs her hand, and they walk outside to meet Yanagi while Hori and Miyamura watch from the balcony. When Yanagi finally shows up, he apologizes for being late, explaining that his teacher needed him. The moment Hori and Miyamura see him, they're stunned to see that he's Brad Pitt level attractive. Toru feels self-conscious knowing all too well he is leagues behind Yanagi, but fortunately for him, Yanagi assumes Yuki is already dating Toru and leaves with a smile. The second he's gone, Hori rushes down to Yuki demanding to know why she rejected such a beautiful man. Yuki simply shrugs, saying she's not into guys like that, though in reality she's just hiding her feelings for Toru like a lovesick puppy. Later, Ayasaki tells Yuki that while Yanagi may be incredibly attractive, his eyesight is so bad that he's basically blind, often bumping into walls like an idiot. Curious, Yuki approaches Yanagi and suggests he must have mistaken her for Hori, who is way more attractive. Yanagi, however, confidently replies that he wasn't mistaken at all and he's actually had a crush on her for a while now, making me believe that Yuri is an idiot for rejecting a confident king like Yanagi. The next day, Hori decides to mess play with her favorite plushie, aka her boyfriend, so she decides to braid Miyamura's hair just to see how he reacts. Of course, a bunch of girls come up to him, complimenting his new look. Now normally, Miyamura wouldn't pay much attention, but the moment he so much as acknowledges their existence, Hori immediately gets pissed off and smacks him like that Akon song. Without giving him a reason, she storms out of the classroom, leaving him standing there completely lost. However, just as she's about to disappear from view, Miyamura catches Mizuchi, one of their classmates, watching the whole thing unfold with a weird look on his face. Not wanting to make things worse, he quickly chases after Hori to try and calm her down, only for her to explode into a full-blown tantrum about how those same girls who are now being all nice to him were the ones who treated him as if he looked like a labubu before he got his new haircut. As they're walking and Hori continues venting, they pass by Tanihara, the same guy who used to be a villain who constantly pestered Miyamura and even told Shindo to stop being friends with him. Turns out some things never change because Tanihara and his friend immediately start picking on Miyamura just like they used to, and to make things worse they even throw some mean comments Hori's way. Unfortunately for him, he's as stupid as me for believing I stood a chance with Zayn Malik, and Hori, who was already on edge, takes all of her built-up frustration out on him, absolutely wrecking him on the spot like the Undertaker during a wrestling match. After that, she finally feels satisfied. Later that day, Shindo goes to grab some food at a restaurant when he unexpectedly runs into Tanihara, who now looks like he just got out of a street fight with his face all bruised up. Naturally, Shindo asks what happened, and Tanihara, still in disbelief, explains that he ran into Miyamura and out of nowhere his crazy girlfriend gave him a beatdown for messing with him. When Tanihara asks who that girl even was, Shindo tells him that it was none other than Hori and warns him not to try anything funny with Miyamura again unless he wants to get bodied by the baddie again. Meanwhile, Miyamura is at Hori's place helping her wash dishes when she suddenly notices he's looking kind of down, so she asks him what's up and tells him to cheer up. Just having someone who actually cares about him is enough to make Miyamura feel better, and for a moment, he forgets about everything else like me after smoking a J. The next day, Hori is back at it again, begging Miyamura to be a little rougher with her like he was last time, but he keeps refusing because he can't afford being cancelled over some roleplay. Just then, Shindo suddenly shows up out of nowhere like COVID, startling Miyamura. Jokingly, he says he just couldn't sit back and watch a girl as pretty as Hori beg for something like this, and Hori, playing along, complains that Miyamura doesn't love her anymore, making the situation even funnier. Shindo, taking it a step further, tries to get all flirty with Hori just to mess with Miyamura, but she immediately shoots him down with the coldest, most uninterested expression ever because she's a loyal girly pop. Miyamura tells Hori they should get going, but she insists that he should make her move. Giving in, Miyamura finally grabs her hand and aggressively pulls her along, scolding Shindo as they leave, leaving the poor guy completely confused about what just happened. Meanwhile, Tanihara and his crew are wandering around near a convenience store like a bunch of thugs when they spot Hori approaching, and the moment they see her, they all start internally panicking. One of the guys who hasn't met her before tries to talk trash only for his own friends to immediately shut him up like. In a desperate attempt to avoid another view of Hori's belt collection, the guys start pretending to pick up trash from the street, hoping Hori doesn't see them as a threat. Tanihara mutters that Hori is an absolute menace, but then, to his horror, he sees Miyamura casually slapping her, and she actually likes it because they're low-key as freaky as MGK and Megan Fox at award shows. On the other hand, Tanihara is still struggling to process how Miyamura, the same guy he used to clown on back then, is now somehow bagging 10-10 hotties. As Miyamura and Hori arrive home, Suta announces he's heading out, and Keisuke reminds him to be back by dinner. Seizing the opportunity, Miyamura asks Kyosuke for some relationship advice, and for some reason, the man turns his bathroom into a confessional so that Miyamura can open up. There, Miyamura explains how Hori has this strange obsession with being treated badly, and Kyosuke suggests it's because Miyamura is always too nice to her. Alexa, play Daddy Issues by The Neighborhood. Since she's already seen the good, she now wants to see the bad side because says Voldemort is probably on her hear me out list. However, when Hori suddenly barges in on their deep conversation, Kyosuke warns her to go easy on Miyamura because the poor guy is out here trying his best. Instead of taking it seriously, Hori immediately roasts him, pointing out that he should actually focus on his own failed marriage instead of playing love guru for losers. The next day, Toru tells Miyamura how he went to karaoke with Shu, but all the guy wanted to do was cosplay Mariah Carey, making it a weird experience. At that moment, their classmate Mizuchi buys a drink from the vending machine but doesn't even bother saying hi, making Miyamura suspect he's avoiding them because he has a thing for Hori, because obviously, the world revolves around Miyamura's girlfriend. Later, Miyamura realizes he left his phone in the science lab, and when he goes back to get it, he runs into Mizuchi, who helps him search for it. After a while, they realize the phone was in Miyamura's back pocket the entire time, leaving Mizuchi frustrated and feeling like Dora the Explorer. That night, Tanihara has a bizarre dream where he and Miyamura are trapped in a small room surrounded by rabbits, and when he wakes up, he suddenly wants Miyamura's number. After getting it from a friend, he calls, but Miyamura doesn't answer, making him think he's being ignored. The next day, he visits Miyamura's mother's bakery, but finds out they're about to close, so he decides to come back later. Before leaving, he mentions the call, and Miyamura reveals his phone was broken, meaning he wasn't ignoring him after all. Seeing Miyamura's kind smile as he says goodbye, Tanihara starts realizing maybe the guy isn't as lame as he always thought. Looks like Hori slapped some sense into him. One day, the weather starts getting colder as it's cuffing season, and Hori decides to start wearing a scarf to keep warm as if she can't simply steal her boyfriend's hoodie. Just then, they run into Tanihara, who casually says hi, and for some reason Hori starts throwing hands at him like a hood rat because she's just mad that Tanihara has been getting a little too friendly with Miyamura lately. Tanihara quickly assures her that he and Miyamura aren't nearly as close as she's imagining, and tells her she should be keeping an eye on Shindo instead, since that man practically spends half his nights at Miyamura's place. Right on cue, Shindo himself appears out of nowhere, proudly boasting about all the times Miyamura has stayed over at his place like he's his personal escort. Sensing that things are about to get violent, Tanihara quickly yanks Shindo away before Hori starts practicing jujitsu on him. Once they're gone, Hori starts overthinking, suddenly worried that some random guy might steal Miyamura from her, and tells him that if he ever decides to fall for someone else, it better be a girl and not a dude. The next day at school, Miyamura walks up to the boys and tells them to keep their distance from him, or Hori will haunt their dreams like La Llorona. One evening, Yuki is out shopping with her little sister when she unexpectedly runs into Yanagi, who's finally decided to wear glasses and embrace his blindness. Curious, he asks her what she's doing, and Yuki explains that she's picking up some art supplies for her sister. A moment later, her sister appears, and Yuki introduces her to Yanagi. She immediately asks if the two of them are dating, but gets disappointed when she learns Yuki dumped such a pretty piece of eye candy. Embarrassed, Yuki apologizes for her sister's bluntness, but Yanagi doesn't seem to mind. In fact, he's actually happy to see her outside of school for once. However, not wanting to stir up any unnecessary drama with Toru, he quickly excuses himself because he's an unproblematic king. However, Yuki gets all sad that her relationship with Toru was merely a lie that told herself along with everyone else. Turns out Delulu is not always the Solulu. Later, she meets up with Ayasaki and tells her that Sakura asked her if she and Toru were really dating, and Yuki couldn't bring herself to tell her the truth. She wants Ayasaki to tell her the truth, but Ayasaki refuses because she knows Yuki has her thirsty eyes set on Toru. Recalling her conversation with Sakura, Yuki remembers how her lips trembled as she hesitated to answer, which just made her want to come clean even more. After Ayasaki leaves, Yuki is left to drown in her own despair like me after looking at my old yearbooks, knowing that Toru only sees her as a friend. She reminisces about the first time he held her hand, even though it was all part of their fake act, and remembers how she selfishly asked him to keep it up for just a little while longer. Deep down, she had been hoping that if they kept pretending, Toru would eventually develop real feelings for her, but now she realizes how messed up that thinking was. This girl must be ovulating 24/7. A few days later, Hori and the others notice that Yuki hasn't been coming to school, probably because she's been diagnosed with Virginia pneumonia. While Miyamura assumes she's just sick, Hori isn't convinced since Yuki hasn't even responded to any of their messages. Meanwhile, at home, Yuki's little sister keeps nagging her to go back to school, but Yuki just stays silent. Seeing her like this, her sister reminds her of how she always holds back instead of asking for the things she wants, and tells her she should start speaking her mind like a girl boss. To lighten the mood, she also tells Yuki to keep baking cookies and cupcakes because the last batch she made was surprisingly decent, which is honestly as good as she can get. After thinking things over, Yuki finally decides to turn on her phone and is immediately bombarded with a ridiculous number of messages from her friends. As she scrolls through them, she comes across one from Toru. In it, he casually mentions that Sakura confessed to him. The second she reads it, her whole world stops because there's no way she can compete with a mamacita like Sakura. Despite the gut-wrenching feeling in her chest, she tells herself to move on and resolves to return to school the next day after taking the L. She acts normal around Hori, pretending like nothing is wrong, but Toru isn't buying it. Sensing that something is up, he pulls her aside for a private chat on the school rooftop. Yuki assumes this is the moment where he'll finally tell her they don't need to keep up their fake relationship anymore, but instead, he brings up Sakura's confession, maybe to rub it in her face a bit more. He reveals that homewrecker Sakura actually told him not to answer right away because she still believes he's dating Yuki. Frustrated, Yuki asks why he didn't just clear up the misunderstanding, to which Turo responds that he didn't think it really mattered. Feeling bold, she then asks him if he would have ever considered dating her if they weren't pretending. Turo, caught off guard, awkwardly admits that he thinks she's out of his league, which is just his excuse for being a wuss and not asking her out like a man. Trying to change the topic, Toro asks why she hasn't been baking any cookies lately, but Yuki's mind is too preoccupied with other thoughts like how to hang off her ceiling fan this afternoon. She reflects on how Sakura had slowly mustered up the courage to confess to him after baking him cookies, while she, on the other hand, had only been running away from her true feelings like the edgy lead of an indie movie. The idea of Toro being with Sakura makes her heart ache, but what scares her even more is the thought that he might never understand how much she truly likes him. As the conversation drifts, Toro mentions how it's the coldest day of the year and that he's hoping for snow. Yuki reminds him that snow also means they'll have to deal with the pain of shoveling later, but Toro just keeps passionately defending his love for the snow, probably because he has a whole harem to cuddle with in this freezing weather. Watching him get so worked up over something so simple actually makes Yuki feel warm inside and down there, and for a brief moment, she forgets about her sadness. Meanwhile, Sengoku starts suspecting that Sakura has a boyfriend since she's been in such a good mood lately, because what other joy could a girl have in her life? Ayasaki tells him it's actually the opposite before walking off without further explanation. Later, as Sengoku is cleaning the student council room, Sakura walks in with a bright smile, looking noticeably more cheerful than usual. She approaches the window, glancing outside, and suddenly notices Yuki handing a drink to Toru. For a second, she completely spaces out, the smile disappearing from her face, just like how I disappear at the first sign of commitment. Sakura turns on her heel and quietly starts to leave, but Sengoku, picking up on her shift in mood, stops her and asks what's wrong. She confesses that she was rejected before she even had the chance to properly ask her crush out. Sengoku, taken aback, doesn't know what to say at first, but as he tries to offer her some words of encouragement, Sakura, unable to hold back anymore, finally breaks down, letting out all the emotion she had been holding in, because this is her only chance at therapy. One day, Hiro realizes that most of them are only children, but Toru catches everyone off guard by revealing that Shu actually has a younger sibling. A few days earlier, Shu had invited Toru over to his place, and Toru was left speechless when he discovered that Shu had a younger sister. On top of that, he was acting super composed in front of her, as opposed to his James Corden act. Just as they're discussing this, Shu bursts into the room, hyped up and asking if they want to grab burger fries after school, only to get immediately scolded by the girls for his usual reckless enthusiasm. Later, they all meet up with Yanagi, and Hori notes he always speaks super formally to everyone except Yuki. Just the other day, Ayasaki had been pestering Yanagi to say goodbye to her, but he looked visibly uncomfortable because Ayasaki is as invasive as Meta's privacy policies. Yet when Yuki passed by, he casually told her he'd see her later, which we all know is how booty calls work in this school. Seeing this, Shua suggests that Yanagi start calling everyone by their first names to break his overly stiff habit. Yanagi hesitates since he's never addressed any of his friends so casually before, and when Shu keeps pushing, Toru decides to physically knock some sense into him. Yanagi acknowledges that the way he talks makes him feel distant from the group, and even though it's hard for him, he genuinely wants to be closer to them, especially Yuri, who makes him want to smash. Just then, Sengoku walks in, casually calling them a weird bunch, so Miyamura and Toru jump at the chance to point out how Sengoku acts way too relaxed around them despite knowing them for only a short time. As the boys keep goofing off, Hori decides to leave them to their nonsense. Watching them fool around, Yanagi finally musters up the courage to call Toru by his first name. Shu immediately demands the same treatment because obviously his name is literal footwear, but Yanagi insists on taking things one step at a time. Later, Yanagi and Miyamura get into a dumb argument and turn to Sakura for an opinion. She quickly realizes they're fighting over who's taller and just tells them both to apologize to each other. Yanagi immediately says sorry, which somehow annoys Miyamura because he wanted to apologize first. They start bickering again, and Sakura finds their childish antics oddly amusing, even though these bottoms are cheesy as heck. The next day, Miyamura asks Sawada how she feels about Sengoku and Toru, and she casually replies that they seem normal. Miyamura then explains that he's trying to help her get more comfortable around guys, so he, Sengoku, and Toru start bribing her with snacks, turning it into a competition to see who she warms up to first. This is literally every pick-me's wet dream. Just then, Hori and Shu arrive, with Shu being as loud as James Charles, immediately causing Sawada to panic. Shu asks Miyamura to put in a good word for him, but even after Miyamura reassures her, Sawada still refuses to acknowledge Shu's worthless existence. Later, Shu starts complaining that his throat feels sore. I wonder what he's been up to lately, but brushes it off as no big deal. Playing Dr. Barbie, Hori checks on him and realizes he has a fever, immediately forcing him to go home. On his way out, he bumps into Sawada, who's struggling to carry a heavy box of science equipment. Without saying much, he grabs the box and drops it off in the science lab before walking away because he can act like a gentleman for once too. Sawada, confused, tries to thank him, but Shu doesn't stick around, worried she might catch his cold. Now, Sawada is convinced convinced he's mad at her. The next day, Shuo is back at school feeling fine, but he has no idea that Sawada is pulling a Spy Kids, creeping up on him from behind a door. Sakura catches her and asks what she's doing, and Sawada admits she thinks Shuo is angry at her. Sakura, however, points out that she's never actually seen Shuo mad at anyone because apparently he has no self-respect, and reassures her that she's overthinking it. Just then, Shui steps out of the room and, as usual, starts loudly chatting away upon seeing Sawada. She immediately panics and calls him annoying before sprinting off again. As Shu wonders aloud why she always runs away, Sakura notices Sawada peeking at him from behind a wall, clear proof that she's slowly warming up to him, or she's just a weirdo who clearly lacks socialization. Meanwhile, Shua's younger sister Moto has been hoping to enroll in East High, but she finds out her grades aren't good enough. Same sister, same. When her teacher tells her to aim for a different school, she gets really upset and locks herself in her room. When Shu gets home, she refuses to come out or even eat dinner. Eventually, she tells him what happened, and Shu, in a rather calm fashion, tells her that bad grades are no excuse for starving herself. He asks which school she applied to, but Moto hesitates, worried that he'll just laugh at her. After some pushing, she finally admits she wanted to get into East High but doesn't have the grades for it. When Shu asks if her scores are really that bad, Moto immediately tries to punch him out of frustration, even though he could clock her real good if he wanted to. He catches her fist and points out that her books are practically falling apart from how much she studies, so she's clearly working hard, or maybe she just punches them when she feels dumb. He tells her he knows how much effort she puts in, and jokingly asks which teacher crushed her dreams so he can teach them a lesson. Moto finally breaks down, admitting that no matter how much she studies, her scores don't improve, and watching all her friends easily qualify for top schools makes her feel left behind. After venting, she finally calms down, and Shu drags her to the dinner table, secretly hoping that some nutrition would make her smarter. The next day, Shu asks Hori for a favor and sends Moto over to her house so she can help her study. Hori reflects on how differently Shui acted when talking about his sister, realizing that despite his usual goofball behavior, he's actually a responsible older brother. Later, Hori brings Moto some hot chocolate and comments on how much she resembles Shui. Moto laughs, saying that not only do they look alike, but they also share the same brooding and reserved personality. Looks like our girl Moto is equally as clueless about her brother as she is about studies. Hori is too stunned to speak because in school, Shu is nothing but loud and annoying. Meanwhile, Suda asks Miyamura who the green-haired girl is, and Miyamura explains that she's Shua's sister. To make her feel welcome, they bake banana cupcakes for her. As Moto slowly gets more comfortable around Hori, she mentions how everyone in her class has cell phones, but she only ever uses hers to text Shui, like a loser. Hori asks if they're close, and Moto admits that Shu constantly messages her even when they're in the same house. Meanwhile, Shui picks out a good luck charm for Moto, hoping to boost her confidence before her exams because this dumb kid needs all the luck she can get. As Christmas gets closer, Keisuke asks Hori to invite Miyamura over for the holiday, but when she brings it up, Miyamura tells her he'll be too busy working at his family's bakery and probably won't make it. Hori doesn't want to pressure him, so she says it's fine, but Keisuke and Suda aren't having any of it and keep pushing him to come over until he gets so overwhelmed that he straight up runs away just to escape them. Meanwhile, Toru is out with Shuo and Sengoku when he starts rambling about his crush on Hori, and in the middle of his non-stop talking, he accidentally lets it slip that he and Yuki aren't actually dating. Sengoku immediately gets mad because Sakura had cried in front of him about it, but before he can get too worked up, Toru admits that he actually does like Yuki, which makes Sengoku tell him that as long as they're both solid 6 out of 10s, he should just go with it. The next day, Yuki randomly asks Toru if she can come over to play games, and he agrees after doing a whole attention-seeking bit. Yuki, confused but still down, shows up at his place, but once inside, Toru starts acting sketchy and tells her to be quiet, making her think he's trying to avoid his parents. Then, to make things even weirder, he locks the door and takes off his tie, which makes Yuki freak out because she thinks he's trying to get an all-access pass to her Coachella. Noticing she's uncomfortable, Toru sighs and unlocks the door, telling her to relax because he's not about to do anything weird. Yuki is still flustered and tells him she feels safe around him, which makes both of them turn red and hot like flaming Cheetos. Right at that moment, Toru's mom barges in, but he desperately tries to keep the door shut to stop her from seeing Yuki, who's probably all moist from this encounter. She refuses to back down, so Yuki awkwardly offers to leave, but Toru firmly tells her to stay. When the woman finally steps inside, she happily greets Yuki and then leaves to get them snacks, only for Toru to casually reveal that it isn't his mom, it is their housekeeper Yashiro, who always bombards him with annoying questions about Yuki, which is why he was trying to avoid her. Before he can even breathe, Yashiro walks back in to ask if they want shortcake or cheesecake, when what they actually want is some privacy, and when Yuki picks cheesecake, she gives Toru a knowing look and warns him not to try anything funny. Toru shrugs it off, saying he wouldn't even touch Yuki while she's here, which makes Yuki wonder if he actually would if they were alone. After calming down, they play video games until Yashiro returns with some cake and tea, and they immediately realize she bought it from Miyamura's bakery. Meanwhile, Sengoku, who has been getting hounded by Ayasaki to visit her for Christmas, refuses to go like a red flag, and when she dramatically starts crying about it, Hori and Toru chew him out. When they ask why he won't go, he awkwardly admits that her room is filled with framed, dead insects, and he's terrified of them, as if he doesn't resemble those bugs she fondly collects. Later, Yuriko asks Hori for her grade sheet and is proud when she sees Hori scoring mostly A's, despite all the messing around she's done all year with Miyamura. She also points out that the next time she gets her grades, she'll be graduating, which makes Hori realize how fast time has flown and leaves her thinking about the future. On Christmas Eve, Yanagi bumps into Yuki's sister, and when she notices he isn't wearing glasses, he explains that he switched to contacts, which makes her consider getting some too, because that's how strong his face card is. Yanagi offers to help her pick some out, so they walk off together. Elsewhere, Tanihara is bickering with his brother, Toru is hanging out with Yuki, and Shu is helping Moto study for her entrance exams. Sengoku still refuses to visit Ayasaki's place while Sakura tries to change his mind, playing the role of a love guru who's sadly single herself. Shindo is feeling down because Chika will graduate a year before him, but Chika reassures him that he'll wait. At Hori's place, her family is bummed that Miyamura couldn't make it but are happy when he later shows up to drop off their cake. The second he arrives, they all urge him to stay and eat with them, and even though Miyamura insists he really has to go, they keep pressuring him until Hori has to physically walk him outside like a dog that needs to go potty. As they step out, Hori, still lost in thought about graduation, suddenly says she feels like she still doesn't know enough about Miyamura despite wanting to, which reminds him of when he once said the same thing about her. She then admits she wants to keep dating him even after graduation, and before she can say anything else, Miyamura just casually drops a marriage proposal on her. Alexa, play Champagne Problems by Taylor Swift. Hori is so stunned that Miyamura, realizing what he just did, panics and tries to run, but she stops him and promises to make him happy for the rest of their lives in all the ways he can imagine. They share a sweet moment, but it's cut short when Miyamura gets a call from his mom and has to rush back to the bakery, leaving Hori standing outside in the freezing cold, still processing that she might have gotten engaged out in the street like a hooker. As graduation approaches, Yuki and Hori talk about the upcoming ceremony, and Hori notices that Yuki is keeping all her stuff in the locker like a hoarder instead of taking it home. As she helps her clean up, Toru jokes that Hori is acting like Yuki's mom, but then realizes he and the others also have way too much stuff, so they dump their mess on Hori too, because she loves playing the group's mommy-in-chief. Just then, Shu walks in, and Hori is surprised to see him empty-handed, only to find out that he's been taking his things home little by little. However, he reminds them that he's lent out a bunch of DVDs to Miyamura and Yuki, which they completely forgot to return, probably because they've been too busy gooning over Hori and Toru. Since Hori doesn't have any stuff of her own to carry, they decide to make her haul their extra stuff, leaving her totally frustrated. Over in the student council room, Sakura notices Ayasaki flipping through a travel magazine about a zoo, because that's where Sengoku should move after graduating. Yanagi and Sengoku walk in, and Ayasaki excitedly asks if they'd like to visit the zoo together. Sengoku realizes the zoo is far away, meaning it would require an overnight trip, a car, and a hotel. This guy would literally do anything other than spending the night with his girl. The idea excites Ayasaki, but when Yanagi asks why she's so insistent, she dodges the question and tries to escape. Before she can, Sakura grabs her and tickles her until she spills that she's scared that once they graduate, they'll all go their separate ways and forget about her. Sakura reassures her that they'll still be friends no matter what, and to cheer her up, Yanagi promises to take them on a road trip as soon as he gets his driver's license like Olivia Rodrigo. Meanwhile, Hori is so exhausted from all the work at school that she ends up dozing off under the futon. When she calls for Miyamura in her sleep, he rushes to her and lets her rest her head on his lap. He notices she frowns like a Karen at the sight of a TikToker in her sleep and jokes that she's going to get wrinkles. Watching her sleep so peacefully, he finds himself wishing for moments like this even after they graduate. Just then, he starts wondering how he would have been living the life of a dry priest if he never met Hori. His mind drifts into an alternate reality where none of them became friends, and he remains the loner he used to be. Just as he gets lost in that thought, Hori wakes up, so he shares his feelings with her. She believes that everything happened exactly as it was meant to, calling it fate, when it was just their teenage hormones making them end up in steamy situations. Sitting on his lap, Miyamura reflects on all the good times and the friends he's made because of Hori. On graduation day, Sengoku delivers a speech as the student council president, but in the middle of it, Miyamura sneezes so loudly that the entire hall bursts into laughter, throwing Sengoku off completely, giving him infinite negative aura. Furious that his speech got ruined, Sengoku chases Miyamura until he escapes to the rooftop. There, he mentally bids farewell to his past self, the loner who never made any friends. As the ceremony ends, Sawada cries over not seeing Hori in school anymore, and Sakura and Toru have an awkward but heartfelt goodbye as their ship sailed a long time ago. Yuki overhears Sakura's words and feels sad that she'll leave without confessing her feelings because she's, hands down, the queen of self-sabotage. Later, Yanagi invites Yuki on the road trip, and outside, Keisuke shows up to congratulate Miyamura, making everyone think he's his dad, which makes Hori absolutely lose it. Meanwhile, Shu and Moto leave together, and Miyamura walks home with Hori, holding her hand, realizing how much he once feared getting close to people, only to now be deeply in love with her. That's it for this video. Leave a like and comment which anime you want us to cover next. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.